development. We also have Lee Davis, he's interim director of teaching and learning, and we have Juliet Wilson, director of assessment. We have Richard Gilby, who's the regional director for Latin America, and most of you have met him. And we have Rebecca Ash, our international marketing manager. She will also be monitoring and moderating the questions, the Q&A after the Cambridge brief presentation. And we also have Anique Blanchard, the regional development executive here, based here in Argentina as well, and most of you also met her. In the interest of time, we're not going to have time to ask you to introduce each other. So if we could ask you to introduce yourselves on the chat box and just say your name and if you want your role, but yes, your school, so that our Cambridge guests have an idea. And well, we look forward to spending the next hour together. So thank you for being here, and it's over to you, Lee.
Thank you, Lucilla, and yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for giving us your time today. First of all, though, I must say condolences, obviously, for the passing of Diego Maradona this week. El Diez. It was very sad. We saw some images of the Velatorio get passed through our main media channels here, and as Ian will know, some friends of ours sent through a photograph of a River fan being consoled by two Boca fans. So you know somebody very serious indeed has passed this week. So our sincere condolences about that. The next thing I'd like to say is, you know, what a challenging year it has been for you all. I know in particular, Latin America has been really hit hard by the pandemic. And again, just my time at St. George's many years ago now, just seeing a photograph of the Galpon being changed from a basketball place, from a sort of a place of games and PE to a makeshift hospital. And you suddenly realize how serious these things are. So again, you know, these are major challenges. I know that schools have only just opened for you, so absolutely, it's been a major challenge. And of course, the big one for you was the cancellation of the exams in November. And again, you know, the challenges that presents for you, the fact that takes away a lot of the motivation for the teachers, for the students, and what they're actually working towards. And of course, then, you know, what that might mean for you as you reach the end of your academic year and then going into next year. And on that, Christine is really sorry. So our chief executive, Christine, is really sorry she can't be with us today, which is why we're recording the session. So hopefully that's okay. But she would love to obviously meet with you again. If we can run the ESSARP conference in September next year, she'd love to come down and spend some time with you and get to know you better, because that's a major sort of initiative for her in the years to come. We are here to listen. We're not really here to sort of talk to you and tell you stuff. It's about listening to the comments that you have, the questions you have. You have Juliet from assessment, so we've got that covered. We've got Tristan from curriculum, so we've got that covered, and myself obviously around teaching and learning. So the three big areas in schools, and obviously the relationship that you have with Cambridge through ESSARP. We can, you know, hopefully answer most of your questions there. So on that, I'd like to invite you to comment or to question, and we're here, as I say, to help answer those and to listen to what you've got to say. So over to you. Who would like to go first?
Please do raise your hand or put a question in the chat.
This is the worst. The first question is the worst. Then they tend to start flowing in.
So we've got a question from Ian. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Can you see me? I think I've got a problem with my camera.
We can now, Ian.
You can? Ah, okay. All right. Good. Well, thanks very much. Good to see you all. Good to hear you, Lee. How are you doing? You're looking okay anyway, so I suppose that's important. And Tristan as well. No, I've not got many questions, but one thing that's going around here with a few schools, not all schools, and there's quite a few schools represented here, so it'd be interesting to get their opinion as well, is we were quite disappointed when the exams were cancelled and the students weren't given an opportunity to get a grade. And now we've heard that they will be getting a grade for the May sessions. So it'd be really nice to hear from you guys that perhaps when the November session comes next year for us, the Southern Hemisphere might be treated the same as the Northern Hemisphere. Is that possible, or is it still too long away? Well, hopefully we'll be back to normal then, but if we're not, how will it look?
Yeah. Juliet, do you want to respond to that first?
Hi, I will, yes. I think you're right. It's probably a bit too far away to say what the situation will be like, but obviously we would do all we can to make sure we're treating all candidates equally, and certainly any sense that different hemispheres are getting different standards or opportunities, we would obviously do everything to make sure that that doesn't happen. So exactly what's going to happen in May and June this year, next year, we don't know yet. We're currently working on contingencies. We can tell you a bit more about that if you're interested later. And obviously, they'll be there in place for November if needed.
Juliet, do you want to go on to that? I think that's a key thing, the contingencies that we're putting in place for the 2 forthcoming series.
Okay, so yeah, I will. Happy to say something about it. Just to say that we're currently just finalising consultation with schools about this. So nothing is set in stone, nothing is decided. We are also awaiting on the Department of Education and Ofqual in the UK, in England, what they're going to announce. Not that we have to do what they're saying, but we obviously want to put in context our package for schools compared to what the DFE in England is doing. What we've been consulting on is 2 areas, really. One is what we're calling exemptions. So that's where candidates would be allowed to drop a component up to 50% of the exam if they were unable to feel that they were sufficiently prepared because of loss of learning and teaching to take that component. So we've been consulting on what schools think about that, and we've got 2 ideas. One is that we would give a list of syllabuses where an exemption would be possible. And the other option is schools just tell us which exemptions they would like. The feedback we've had so far from schools is they don't want an absolute free-for-all. What they would like is if we said which exams, which components could be exempt. And examples of this, for example, would be science practicals, where kids haven't been able to get into school and practice for practicals. So one idea would be to exempt that component and the students could drop it. So that's one idea that we're consulting on. The other main area would be foreign language speaking tests, where it's hard perhaps for the school to arrange for a face-to-face speaking test. So exemptions is one area. And the other area we've been consulting on is what we're calling a portfolio of evidence. So this would be where where a region or a country goes into absolute lockdown and the children can't come in and take the exams at all. And we'd be asking teachers to send in some evidence that we would then mark in Cambridge. And one piece of evidence would be a mock exam. Another one could be a piece of coursework or extended task. And we're also looking at doing some digital multiple choice assessments. So we're working up a proposal of what this portfolio of evidence would look like. And this would just be used really in case of a complete lockdown. So we were caught last June, we didn't have this in place and there was no contingency, but we've had a year now to kind of get something in place. So we think it's really important we do have something to offer. There's lots of questions about it and, it's not firmly decided, but we're looking very hard at what that might look like. And the final thing, which has just come up, is in England, they are looking at what they're calling advanced notice, which is where they would give students advance notice of the topics that are going to be on the exam papers. Now, we don't like this idea at all, really, for many reasons, but we are just exploring it, because if England does it, then we may be asked, well, you know, why aren't we doing it? So we're looking at the pros and cons and the feasibility of this advanced notice. The other thing England is thinking about is students being allowed to bring material into the exam, like dictionaries or formulae table, things like that. So that's for discussion as well. But we're working really intensively to look at all these ideas, consult on them, and at the beginning of December, we will announce what the package is for schools. Sorry, that was quite a long answer, wasn't it? But it's quite a complicated area.
No, thanks. That's great. One thing that came to my mind listening when you were talking there is there any thought of online exams replacing written exams?
Well, yes. So we have just kicked off a big piece of work across Cambridge Assessment and Cambridge University Press, looking at digital assessment. And I know we've tried to do this before. I worked in Cambridge English before, and we tried very hard in Cambridge English to have digital assessment as well. But this is a very serious programme, and we're looking at various things. So the first thing is these digital multiple choice tests that we would use in the portfolio of evidence. And that's our first little baby step into trying to do something. But beyond that, we are about to do a big consultation, which I hope you'll be able to take part in, which is, what do you want from digital assessment? Do you want us to replace IGCSEs with online IGCSEs? Or do you want us to look at a whole different paradigm of assessment, which would be much more formative, regular progress, diagnostic? You know, what do people want out of online assessment? So that's our second sort of horizon. So our first step is to just see if we can do some lovely, quick and easy, multiple choice, auto-marked digital assessments to see how they go down with our customers. And then beyond that, we'll be looking at what you want. I don't know. I mean, would you like geography IGCSE online, or does that feel pointless? It's an open question, really. You know, I'd love to hear your views on what you'd like us to develop.
Is that okay, Ian? I mean, there is one thing I'd like to add to that. As Juliet was mentioning there about the sort of what we're calling tactical digital assessments. So these are potentially multiple choice papers produced online, delivered online, and done online by students. One of the key things we're going to be looking at here is how those are being done by schools, how they are being used by schools. So as you can imagine, we've got a process whereby if a school in the United States does a paper in the afternoon, and then the same paper, if you like, done digitally, is done by Chinese students then the following morning, what they will see is something different. And not exactly the same items. So we're looking at those sorts of things, what's called linear on-the-fly testing. So you draw from a bank of items, for example. So there are lots of things going into this. But to what extent then is that done by a very large cohort of students in one sitting? Is it done by 2 or 3 classes at one time, and then in the afternoon their friends who are studying the same program, but we'll see something slightly different in the afternoon. So there are lots of things we're trying to figure out on this, because we don't think it's going to be replicating the exam hall experience where 200 young people sit in an exam hall. So yes, lots to figure out, really. Okay.
I'd love your views on that. I'd love your views on, what you'd like assessment to look like in the future. We've got ideas, but we need to validate them, and that's why we're going to do a big bit of consultation early in next year, just to find out what we want. And I noticed just somebody had said in the chat about new ways of assessment, multiple choice will be the first thing to be dropped. Yeah, great. I really understand that, but we also have to be practical and think, what can we do online quickly and easily with instant results and that is multiple choice. That's why it's attractive, but it would never, of course, replace all the components. That would be crazy. We're known for something much bigger and better than that. But to be pragmatic and practical, it's a good first start.
Savannah,
another question.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
I just said there's another question just in response to the topic you've been talking about, saying, will there be a survey on this new possible way of assessment?
Yes, there will be a piece of research. Actually, Lee might want to answer this because it's Lee's team who are going to be leading this bit of research. Do you want to say something, Lee?
Yeah, we're going to be using a methodology called jobs to be done. And essentially what we're going to be asking teachers is, what jobs do you need doing when you assess students? And this therefore speaks not only to attainment and measuring performance, but also progress, value added, impact that you're having on young people and so on. So it's going to be asking those sorts of questions, which we think digital assessment will be able to help you with. It's essentially that, absolutely.
Silvana, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to, Julie asked what ideas we had as regards how to go about it. First of all, I think it is great that at this stage, Cambridge is rethinking and redesigning a way of not being caught by the same wave, because we really don't know what's going to happen. You're on your third wave, we are in finishing our first, and we don't know the amount of waves will be coming in our country. But I was thinking, I understand multiple choice is an easy way, effective way to test, but I find this as a window of opportunity for Cambridge to slowly go towards another kind of assessment in which children and students can be more protagonists, where there should be. I work a lot with professional development qualifications. I love the portfolios. I love that there is an area for theory, there is an area for practice and reflection. Of course, children would need another kind of framework, but the portfolio is completely digital. There is collaboration among teachers. So thinking about a way in which slowly certain subjects could finish in a personal project or collective project, in which most of the aims and objectives of those subjects are taken into account. So whatever pandemic attacks us in the future, we know that digitally we have got a way of going about it. So I think that this should be seen as a window to really to change from a multiple choice that I understand immediate way of assessment to a more formative, more updated way of assessing that goes in line with the changes that we are witnessing in our ESSARP schools, so that we really do the change, or Cambridge does the change, before schools swap to a different kind of learning. So I think that the time is excellent.
Yeah, and thank you. I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things we realise we are going to have to do is do things in parallel. We're not going to suddenly swap from one thing to the next, because people will adopt the new way at a different speed, won't they? So, you know, I think our work's cut out for us to keep running with our paper-based summative assessments, because across our 160 countries, some people really love those and will never want to leave those, but then build up another set of assessment or way of assessing or products which will appeal to people who are a bit more forward thinking and want a different approach. I think in the past we've panicked sometimes and not known whether, you know, do we dump what we're doing now and go all over to something digital? Well, we can't. So it's kind of doing it in parallel and working out when to shift our focus and when to, so I think it's really important what you said. Yeah.
Paula, you have your hand raised. You're on mute as well, Paula.
What we also thought of with the management team at ESSARP is that probably if we have more opportunities of having coursework, I mean papers changing from set days to coursework, so that could mean a different timetable in the future. That is to say, less less set dates, and we could push that to a November session instead of having an October and November session, which is too demanding for the schools, you see. So less set dates for certain papers only, and the rest would be coursework. And I think this is the turning point. I mean, this is the moment to change things because we have this opportunity. Thank you.
Tristan, do you want to come in on that? Because I know you're a big fan of this.
Yes, I'm a fan of good coursework. Igcse has a lot of coursework and alternative to coursework options, and we've protected that actually despite the fact that we lose a considerable amount of money currently on coursework because not enough schools do it. I deeply regret the fact that most schools take alternative to practicals or coursework paper options in the various subjects, but we're committed to coursework because we believe it's essential in terms of authentic assessment for students and gives them a chance to be assessed in a better way than the examinations hall, and it's more engaging. Also, I mean, we will need to look at the future of IGCSEs and 14 to 16 qualifications in general in terms of what schools want. So I'm listening with great interest at the comments being made here. There is a trade-off, of course, between reliability and validity when you talk about alternative methods of assessment. One of the strengths of Cambridge assessments has always been incredibly high reliability, this year accepted possibly because of the incredibly difficult circumstances that the world is in. But historically, we have really put a high stake on reliability. In other words, put simply, that all candidates are treated the same through assessment. Validity, if you have aspiring educational objectives around collaboration, creativity, the sorts of things that we know we want to encourage young people to do, obviously, is really, really important. And that's better assessed through coursework, through portfolios of evidence, through reflection pieces and creative works and stuff like that. But inherently, because the ways in which those are done are not controlled in the same way as examinations, it means the results are slightly less or significantly less reliable. Now, to me, that's a trade-off. I would always veer on the side of validity over reliability, because to me, as an educator, the most important thing about any assessment is a positive backwash effect on learning, and in particular with the 14 to 16 age group, which in most of the world is not really a high-stakes summative test because they go on to do A-levels or some other IB or whatever qualifications they do. It's more important. So, we're looking at this, and I would be, and I encourage you to give us, a real feedback about how you would like to see the future of 14 to 16, and for that matter, other groups of age ranges evolve and develop. Maybe not timing this, but that's something that we could correspond with ESSARP around getting some, answers to part of a survey. But ESSARP is the most sophisticated and best schools network we have in the world. So it's something that you would be able to coordinate that and have a significant part of in that discussion and feedback. So Rebecca, that might be something that we could organise.
Sure. Okay.
Can I respond to Marianne's comment about assessment changes and potentially multiple choice? What's really interesting actually with multiple choice is that it provides a very quick and parsimonious way, so a very efficient way of checking knowledge and understanding, which is often the first sort of key assessment objective, isn't it? It's not knowledge and understanding in our syllabuses and qualifications. But thereafter, and some of the things that Silvana was talking about in terms of portfolio of evidence and so on, you're looking to test, obviously, skills around analysis, synthesis, and ultimately evaluation and creation. And that's really where we're looking at, therefore, a basket of assessments, a basket of things that we can sort of enable students to sort of have access to, such that they can demonstrate their capabilities in these areas. So I think you'll see as the assessment models evolve, and where we can bring in digital much more, particularly around the portfolio piece, where we'll be able to sort of have extended pieces of assessment, or extended sort of tasks and activities, which enable students to really get to the heart of some of those higher order thinking skills.
Rebecca, I think there are a couple of comments here in the chat box that need.
So again, we've got questions from Marianne regarding May, June 2021. Would there be grades through portfolio or exams? I think, could this be replicated in November? I think, Juliet, you might have addressed that at the beginning with regards to our plans there.
Yeah, I hope I have answered that one.
Marianne, do let us know if you have other questions regarding that. A specific question from Sam around, are there plans for there to be an alternative to practical for the AS A-level science exams as there are for IGCSE? Could anyone tackle that?
There aren't currently. I don't know if either of my colleagues would like to add anything to that. This does come up quite regularly, yeah.
Yes, it is a good question, particularly in the light of, obviously, the pandemic. We don't have an alternative to practicals for A-level and AS, as you're aware. And there's a very good reason for that generally, which of course is that for the sciences and to go on to study sciences at tertiary level, evidence of students actually engaging in practicals is obviously critical to their success at university level. So we don't do it. I'm not sure, and I don't think, Juliet, I mean, you're able to sort of answer this really. We don't have the time, unfortunately, to do it for next year either, do we? Because of the lead times in papers.
We wouldn't be able to do it in time for 2021, no. But it's good that it keeps coming up, because it makes us keep thinking about it and, you know, challenging ourselves as to, are the reasons that Lee just said, that why we don't do it, are they still valid? What would universities think if we dropped it? So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I would hate to see that sort of thing being dropped, because to me, you cannot be a scientist without having practical science skills, and therefore they need to be assessed. What happens this year, of course, is a tricky one, because so I am confident, and Juliet, you know, that there will be accommodations made for this exceptional year. We are under pressure in parts of the world, you know, who would love us not to offer practical science, to have alternatives to practical science at A level, and they would all do it. And some of our competitors have that. But we've resisted the temptation for the reason that Lee has said. We want more practical skills developed in our courses, not less. And so that would be moving completely in the wrong direction as far as I'm concerned. But the need to cover what are very real needs this particular year obviously will mean that probably exceptions in the way we assess practical skills will be made.
There's another comment about what's the point of having exams if pupils know beforehand what they will be asked. I think that refers to the potential plans in the UK, Juliet. Is that right?
Yes, that's one of the reasons we're not so sure about it ourselves. Yes, I mean, I guess it's a balance, you know, if there's a real fear that there's been a lot of lost learning and teaching time, then giving teachers an idea of what they should focus on and not focus on, and students an idea of what they should revise and not revise, I guess is kind of an accommodation, you know. But yeah, it's a tricky one, yeah.
It's a tricky one. I've got an interesting anecdote from another organisation I used to work for, where accidentally one year a history paper was published that had been sat previously in a previous year. As the exam, about 50% of the cohort had used that precise paper as the practice paper for their trial exams, for their mock exams, and 50% hadn't, and the organisation was thrown into a deep quandary about what to do. They did a very significant analysis of the results, which are absolutely fascinating, because with all other factors taken into account and factored out as much as they could be, the students who had done that history paper as their mock fared worse than the students who'd never seen it. So it's really interesting about how we think, you know, if you give students material and they see it and can work on it, that actually it will affect their ultimate performance. I mean, there's an intuitive sense we all think it's unfair, but in reality, it's not. And I used to be a teacher, and you know, you could give students, the kids would perform basically according to their ability, whether they'd seen the material or not. It's just an interesting, I thought, just an interesting anecdote.
The other thing about the advance notice, it seems to me, is that for some syllabuses, some subjects, you couldn't give advance notice. I mean, you might be able to in English literature. Let's say you could say, you know, the question's going to be on Macbeth or Keats. But for maths, how can you do that? Or some of those subjects where the content is just embedded throughout the syllabus and throughout the assessment. So it seems fundamentally unfair that for some you could give advance notice that would be meaningful, and others you couldn't. So that's why I don't like it very much. But it's not to say we might not have it. But
Marianne makes an interesting point about sort of many times questions are repeated in exams, and that's absolutely true. I think we allow up to about a third of items within a paper to have been sat previously. I mean, obviously you don't know when and at what stage and so on, but they have been, some of these items have been previously exposed, partly because we know how, therefore there's a benchmark of those items. We know what's called question facility, so we know how difficult they are, having got the data on them. So it helps us sort of calibrate that actual series and that actual sort of exam for the grading.
Interesting comment from Deborah about the coursework, saying, I believe not many schools choose coursework because it implies a lot of marking for the teachers.
Yeah, I mean, there are two approaches we can take for that, actually. One is, yes, we ask teachers to mark it and then we moderate those marks. Alternatively, we can ask them just to sort of oversee the completion of the coursework, and then it can be submitted for marking completely by Cambridge. So there are ways we can approach this, actually. I know that there are, we've got it at this time, we've got certain approaches to it, but we can change that over time if we think coursework A is very important, we want it to become more compulsory, and then B, how we actually deal with it by Cambridge ourselves.
I just want to acknowledge another comment about it would be great if the exams are in November and not in October. I don't know if Cambridge colleagues have got any comments with regard to the timing of the exam series.
I think it's more about the length of the exam season than the date. I mean, we found it's becoming earlier and earlier and earlier every year here in Argentina, well, all over the world. And it takes a lot of time out of the students' regular classes, if you like. It's over a month, isn't it? And we've asked from ESSARP, we've asked Cambridge a few times over the years if there's any chance of reducing it. You guys just keep adding more subject, which is great. The variety of subjects is amazing, but it goes on for a long time. It's a long time. And so with all these different, I think it's wonderful, the different ways of assessing you guys are looking at, because that's the world, isn't it? The world is going that way. And I hope one day we don't have too many, 200 students sitting in an exam room, because that's not life. And all these different ways you're looking for assessing are wonderful. So perhaps we can condense it a little bit because of that, the coursework and the digital exams, etc. It's a lot to do, guys. You've got a lot of work over the next few years.
Can we have our Christmas holiday first, please?
There's a question from Silvana saying, how does Cambridge go about updating the content in subjects? Do we use external consultants or examiners, and what's the process around that?
We have normally a 6-year review cycle for all subjects. There's a very defined process. It includes internal evaluation using assessment colleagues and curriculum development colleagues looking at the syllabus, but that's also very much based upon interviews with teachers in schools, run through regional teams, getting feedback and using that. In the case particularly of AAS levels, consulting higher education in high destination countries, so particularly in Australia, United States, Canada and England, essentially using all of that feedback and information that's both internal and external in terms of reviewing and developing the syllabus. So there are teams of people. There's a published plan for syllabus development, that's how it works. What's going to be interesting? Well, the first point, I suppose, is it's obviously developing syllabuses takes a lot of time, and we have something like 250 active syllabuses. So the number is very, very large. So, it's a bit like an oil tanker. That's the only problem, that once it sets off in a direction, it's hard, you can change the steering, make changes, but it's got a lot of inertia. And a challenge for us is going to be around introducing, that we are looking at the future of assessment and the future of qualifications in the light of the discussion we've just had. IGCSE has been around essentially since 1987. And it was originally introduced in consultation largely with international schools as an appropriate education for students at that age range in international schools, and it's resisted a lot of the trends in England. So, for example, in GCSE there is no coursework currently in England. We've kept coursework, we've kept a lot of the things that make international GCSEs, we believe, better and more relevant for the international market. But we can't sit on our laurels. We know that we've got to change and develop and evolve. So it's a real challenge. Curriculum development is linked, because as assessment is inherently linked to developments in, if we change the curriculum and the assessments, they have to go hand in hand. So Juliet and I and Lee are all working closely together on looking at what we can do, both philosophically and practically, and what the timelines are.
Thanks, Christian. And just a comments in the chat just about the length of the exam series again, and the timing effect that has on schools in Argentina. A response from Silvana: IGCSE Art and Design major change. A major change this year, I think, is
following Christian's words. For example, in the case of the revision of IGCSE Art and Design, the result was an incredible turnover of the exam, including digital technologies. So that is an exam and a subject that really showed an important change, taking into account all materials, all media that was used. So that was really a very interesting revision. Hard work for teachers, but I think that it was really worthwhile.
Great, thank you. Another comment from Denise saying there seems to be some concern regarding IT subjects. Denise, do you want to give us a bit more information about that? Either take yourself off mute and speak to that point, or put another comment in the chat.
Yes, I'm not at school, so this is what I hear from heads and teachers. But apparently there seems to be concern regarding the updating of these subjects. So I don't know if any of the teachers or heads present would like to give us more feedback.
I note that the ICT, Information Communication and Technology, Igcse, was published in 2020, so that's this year. So I hope that that is an update. It's better. I mean, you know, we do rely on feedback. Computer science is one with A level. We're starting the revision of that now, and that would be a prime subject for moving quickly to online. You know, so we're looking at things like that as well. I don't know the way in which those are revised is the same as the way I described for all subjects. So, you know, we welcome feedback from schools, ideas from schools, etc.
And we've also talked, haven't we, Tristan, about maybe certain subjects, putting them on a shorter review cycle. I mean, I know that's more work, but for certain subjects, they will get outdated more quickly, perhaps, than others. So it may be we want to look at, you know, maybe computing is the kind of thing we shouldn't wait 6 years to update, perhaps.
And if I could just add, again, sort of trying to connect a few things here. One of the sort of interesting things we're exploring at the moment around statistics is the opportunity that we give to students around data manipulation and modeling. So again, it's not just a sort of paper and pen exercise, but actually here's some data, you know, start sort of testing some of the key skills you want around statistical understanding, and you would use IT obviously for that as well. So we're trying to sort of bring in more of those key transdisciplinary skills that students need, but also to actually sort of look at the powerful knowledge within a particular subject and discipline itself.
Just some further feedback there that computer science used to be very tedious and not at all practical. We found it hard because we use Macs and the papers were prepared for PCs.
Yeah, a very good point. And it's exactly why we're looking at the computer science now. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm just going to check back in case we've missed anything from the chat. Okay, many students find it overly theoretical when it has so many opportunities to be practical and cross-curricular. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's another example of, you know, let's give students a coding problem to do, you know, and sort of obviously build algorithms, solve problems, that sort of thing. Absolutely.
I think I've covered everything that's in the chat. Do feel free to ask other questions or raise your hand if you have other. Thank you, Carlos. So Mac PC for ICT was another problem this year in the remote teaching and learning situation we're in.
Can we ask you about some of the challenges you have worked through by transferring teaching and learning to the home, online, away from school? Who would like to sort of share some experiences there, some successes, some failures, some of the key things you've been experiencing?
Lee, the ESSARP usually spend a lot of time talking. I'm amazed how quiet everyone is today. Amazed.
It's a new medium.
I have a question. One of the things I'm interested in looking at is the future of ICE. ESSARP, you know,
Oh, I think someone could put
I
their
think, could it be Susanna Mochetti that your microphone is open and we're hearing a loud noise?
A bit better now. I was just going to ask about ICE because I'm interested. You know, one of the things I would like. It's a long time since it's really been revised. You know, maybe not now, but in future, now as well, possibly. But in your thoughts about how it could be improved as a group award, in terms of you know, being a little bit more practical, less academic, maybe, We are looking at the moment in Cambridge at introducing well-being as a curriculum component throughout the curriculum. How that would be assessed, of course, would be an interesting question. It would not be assessed in exams. And we haven't made any decisions. But to me, a really good group award signifies that a student has done a broad and balanced curriculum, and particularly in the and done a broad and balanced experience, so that they will have had to have done things like project work and team project work and things like that. So I'm quite keen to, one of my little projects is to look at ICE and ACE, which is the A-level equivalent, and to try to think, are they fit for purpose moving forward? And you are one of the biggest users of ICE. In fact, you are the biggest users of ICE, I think, in the world. So you would have a critical say on anything that happens to ICE.
Thanks, Christian. We've got a few hands raised. Deborah, could we come to you first, and then we'll go to Sam? Deborah, is that working?
No.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I had two answers. Yes, Tristan, the ICE issue. Yes, I know we're a big fan of the ICE in our schools, but the problem we have in Argentina mainly is that we have to combine the Cambridge syllabuses with our national syllabus. Yes, and that's been a problem. And there were changes in our national syllabus. And for our students to get to their A's, yes, it's very difficult, yes, to finish the I's and then prepare for the A levels or the AS levels in only 1 or 2 years, when they have to comply with their national curriculum and their entry to our universities, where their A levels or A levels don't count. Yes, really, they count for abroad. So I think that many schools find that difficult. Okay, and I had an answer for Lee before. I think that the main problem we found this year, luckily I was not teaching this year, but that the main problem was cheating in tests or exams. Yes, because while you could see them, they could have everything and the camera would not be showing it. Or plagiarism, yes, copy paste and send you things like that. And probably that is a problem that Cambridge will find and will have to solve in some way if exams are digital. Yes, I know we can trust our students, but we can trust them up to a certain point. Not everybody is keen in just learning. Yes, they're adolescents. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee, did you want to comment on that before Sam?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. I was just about to say, absolutely, we are aware of some of the concerns around academic honesty and so on. And there are ways in which we can overcome it through remote proctoring, which is obviously some of the things you've been trying, which is interesting actually to hear that. But also how you can lock down browsers, prevent Control-C, Control-V and things like that. So there are things that we can do. And we can know about post hoc, by, through some of the ways that we can, so artificial intelligence can actually scan through and look at some repeated phrases, etc. So there are all sorts of ways we can overcome some of these things, but you're right, these are challenges that we'll have to address.
Thanks. And then moving on to Sam, you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Just from Lee's question and building on Ian's point about talking, I think one of the biggest benefits this year, the silver lining, has been developing Oracy within students, because it's been much harder to, well, as we just mentioned, doing writing in terms of authenticity of their writing. So Oracy has been something that we've been really building, and I was wondering, if Cambridge are thinking at all about building that into their assessment, kind of Oracy, as they have in in the IB. And then just another brief comment about Christian's mentioning the ICE and the ACE. I think one of the issues that we find is that the different groupings that the ICE and the ACE have are slightly confusing to parents and also to students in terms of thinking about which subjects they do, because in some ways, if they select options that are best for their ICE, they're not necessarily the best for their ACE options. And here in Argentina, the ACE are very important for lots of the private universities. So we're getting a little bit of kind of a conflict there between the ICE and the ACE groupings.
Thank you.
So Sam, if I could respond to your point about Oracy, I think this is really interesting. One of the things that we are doing as we're rethinking our assessment models and our curriculum and assessment models is making them more inclusive, making them more appreciative of the neurodiverse learner, so the differences that we have in young people in our classrooms. Now, the way we assess people generally is by what they make, what they do, what they say, and what they write. Now, that fourth one, write, is generally how we would sort of ask students to demonstrate what they know and what they can do. I think through the portfolio of evidence that we will move towards over time, we can ask students to reflect not just through writing, but through what they say. And for those students who find it easier to express themselves by speaking rather than writing, I think we can really sort of accommodate those sorts of things. So I think we're really going into an interesting time, I think, with the way that we think about assessment in the future, and I think that's a really good point. So thank you.
Thanks. So just a few comments going on in the chat. The idea about well-being, I imagine a reflection paper on the application of well-being practices, also community work in response to that.
Do you do the International Youth Award, is that common in Argentina? Because we're working more closely with the award scheme to make it easier for Cambridge schools to work directly through us as a supplier directly of the Youth Award, and of course they have a really good community service component in their structure.
St George's do it, Tristan. I'm not sure how many of the schools in Argentina. I think there's a few, but
I strongly encourage schools to look at it because it's outstanding, complimentary. And you know it's just a great program.
Agreed. It's wonderful. Agreed.
Okay, a suggestion from Richard, A-level systems thinking. And from Lucilla, IGCSE thinking skills. And then from Anit, just to mention
this is like global perspectives done well, develop those sorts of things. I'm a little bit nervous about just adding more and more content, you know, options to what is a very crowded field. We are trying to simplify and rationalize a little bit. But to me, I mean, we do have thinking skills courses, I know at AS level and so forth, but you know, one of the key assessment objectives and learning objectives of global perspectives is to develop both individual and collaborative thinking skills. So, you know, they are embedded in a lot of the courses and could be exploited better.
Okay, thanks, Tristan. And then just a comment from Anik about recognition. We're achieving more and more recognition for AS and A levels and the ACE diploma in universities in Argentina.
And Rebecca, there is a comment from Andrew as well.
Just going back
above
to that.
Anik.
Just going back to that, where is it? Okay, there. Can you comment on what will happen at schools in Argentina next year for students who are unable to take exams in November? Will they transfer to June or November 2021? Any comments with regard to that question?
Juliet, do you want to describe some of these accommodations that we're going to try and put in place for those students who are potentially self-isolating, for example, who are unable to sit in the example?
The portfolio, you mean, or?
Well, that so partly that, yes. I mean, with the portfolio itself, what we're suggesting is that it becomes an insurance policy. And this is one of the things we're consulting about. So to what extent do you think you would like to almost have the portfolio of evidence in conjunction with that sitting of exams in November, such that if a student was not able to, or the country went back into lockdown, or schools had to close, you had that and we were able to therefore award a grade. So that's part of what we're consulting with you.
Yeah.
We are at time. So I don't know if there are any final comments or questions.
I'm sorry, but we held meetings with all the schools and informed them about the possibility of having this portfolio of evidence. So what they're waiting for is for what kind of evidence is required. So they are planning, there are quite a few schools that are planning to enroll candidates for the May-June session, but they need to know, in order to inform parents, what is the evidence that will be required. So I told them, or we told them, that more or less by the 10th of December would have that available so that we can give the corresponding information to all schools.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's it. Did Lee or Lucilla, do you have any final final comments before we close?
Lee?
Yeah, well then I'm very happy to close. Colleagues, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. As I say, we know that schools are just coming back and you've got all sorts of things on your plate. So we really appreciate the time that you've given us this morning, this afternoon. So thank you. Que tengan un buen fin de semana.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. We'll look